Hello, welcome to the next devlog of the sample project that I'm using to create some of the lecture videos with. So one of the next lectures will be on object pooling and using lists and arrays to manage that. It's really more about lists and arrays in the actual project. But we are going to add some basic non-object pooled shooting to the game. Firing off some bullets and sending them in a direction. So we can move around, and when I click, I want to pew pew. It's a technical term. So we're going to keep this as dead simple as possible. All of the complexity will be added as parts of lectures on architecture and managing, having different weapons with different properties and creating a data structure to handle that. Learning about using a list for the data for the object pool. Right now, we just want a regular old bullet. In terms of the actual game, I'm not even sure I want this to be a shooting game. I was thinking maybe like a sword swinging thing, but maybe handle both, But we're going to start simple. So I'm going to create a bullet. I'm actually going to make a child object. That's because I'm going to scale this down. Let's make the child centered on the parent. I don't like having the parent object of things scaled. Maybe that's a little too small. I don't like having the parent object scaled. I like, I like parents to be nice and not rotated, not scaled if in their default positions. So we'll make the bit visuals, and we'll add the circle collider to that. So that's nice and the right size. And then on the parent, we will add. Is that right? Why is that offset? Why did I move the? There we go. On the parent, we will add a rigid body 2D, and that will use the colliders of its children by default. And that's kind of it. Might need a bullet script. So let's add one bullet. That in the scripts folder. Open that up. Create a new weapons folder. While writer launches weapons. I don't know if that's a good name. Yep, it can't open it because I moved the file while it was launched, trying to open the file. That doesn't work. So we also need a player firing. I'm gonna replace this in the future. I don't know what to call it for now. Player weapon handler. Weapon handler. So we have this public facing direction vector 2 from our agent movement. And that's really nice because we can use that in our player weapon handler. So we can, let's make a public game object for bullet prefab. Whenever we're making let's make a serialized field privates. Game object bullet prefab. Whenever I always like to use the suffix prefab in my serialized game object references to differentiate between when I am dragging an asset from a game object from my assets prefab, which is not actually a game object, or dragging one in from the scene, a reference to some actual game object. Prefab, and then we need some kind of fire script. We'll give this a vector to direction. So direction to be firing. Yeah. So we're going to use the instantiate function on the bullet prefab to clone the bullet. And we're going to clone it at our position and our rotation. It's a circle, so the rotation doesn't really matter. But if we're making non-circular bullets, we want them to be rotated in the same direction that we are. That we're facing. Quaternion.look rotation. Is that the one that takes forward direction? Yeah, direction. That's a vector 2 getting cast into a vector 3. That's fine. Right. So that's our new game object. That is of type game object. Because we are cloning a game object, so it will clone the game object. Now we need to get its rigid body so we can make it move. But we don't really need to do that. I don't know how fast the bullet should go, but that's an interesting question because who controls bullet speed? Is that a property of the bullet or a property of the gun? I think it's like a default property of the bullet, and then you have like maybe a modifier, like a guns can shoot faster or slower. We'll just say of the gun for now, and then we'll show how to change it to be in the bullet later. We'll keep things simple. We'll get the rigid body 2D reference that is attached to the bullet. We should probably check if that's null, but I'm not going to, because if it's not null, it will throw an error and the game won't break. I want that to happen. The game will break. I want that to happen. I want the game to break. I want that error to happen because it means I've configured it incorrectly. I want to find that mistake, as opposed to just firing the bullet and there's no error and it just kind of sits there. So I'm writing more fragile code, but things that should definitely be cleaned up and fixed before publication. I could do a check to see if there's no rigid body and then spit out a message in the console, hey, you need to add a rigid body here. That would be even better, but we're keeping it simple. We need to either add a force to the bullet or directly set its velocity. We're going to directly set its velocity, and we'll set it equal to some variable. So it is a direction times bullet speed. Normalized times bullet speed. So we'll enforce that our direction has a magnitude of 1. That way, when we multiply 1 by the bullet speed, the speed of the bullet will be whatever this bullet speed is. If we get an input that is not normalized, that's not a value of 1, that's no good. So now we need to call this function. We should probably do that from the player input class, because that's the class that's going to handle player input. So let's add a player weapon handler. Player weapon. That's fine. And we'll get a reference to it. And then this is check for movement, check for rotation, fire weapon. And then that will be player weapon if input dot get button down 0. That is how we get the left mouse button press. Right. Okay, mouse button down. Get mouse button down 0. Then we will attempt to fire the weapon. Player weapon dot fire. And we will pass in the direction. We happen to know our facing direction. We have it right here from our rotation function, but we might not have that. We can actually get it from this agent movement facing direction, because that's going to be the truthful one. If for whatever reason we try to rotate and it doesn't work because of, say, a collision, we want to use the actual agent dot facing direction. We want to use the facing direction that has happened after this move rotation, right? The real one. Is that right? Are we actually updating that? Facing direction equals direction. Probably should update that, didn't we? So is this rotation? Let's not worry about it for now. If I have a movement script, I want this facing direction to always be accurate, an accurate unit. We'll use transform dot. I think right is what we're using. I think it's right. I think it was default to pointing right. So as it rotates, its local right position should update. Okay, that will work. We'll pass in our direction, fire the gun. So let's make a prefab. Create a folder for our prefabs. Create a folder for our bullets, weapons. Make it a prefab. Delete it from the scene. So before I even try, we'll add player weapon handler. Give it a bullet. Make sure we change the speed so it's not 0. Add another require component so that we don't mess this up. I feel like we shouldn't need a player weapon handler. I feel like this could be, we should do a null check like that. I might want to stage a player that loses their weapon. Maybe we disable the component or something. I don't know. Okay. Why are you? Are you rotated? Yes. Weird. That look rotation was wrong. That look rotation rotated it on the z-axis. This has a second property for up, right? Which direction up is? That should be vector 3 back towards the camera. I think. No. Which way is it? Forward. Shouldn't it be on the z-axis? I mean, let's just try up in the y-axis. Maybe we just use the Euler angle of our rigid body. We don't have a reference to the rigid body. We need to get a reference from. Kind of need to reverse engineer the other one. I mean, look rotations. We don't need to reverse engineer it. We can just. If we don't rotate the bullet, Nice. Other bugs to solve, but one step at a time. If we don't, I mean, it's a circle, so the rotation isn't super important right now, but we do want to get a function that is rotated around sine angle. Rotated around the z-axis, the number of angles, that is the direction. That's silly because we do that every frame anyway. So if we fire it right, no, if we fire it left, then it's rotated. It is rotated. No, it isn't. Bullet's rotated. What does 0 look like? That's right. So that's towards the green. So green is forward. Let's rotate. There's an easier way to test. Yeah, it's for being rotated correctly. Okay, great. Good enough for now. I don't like that. I want to change that. But the whole point of this project is to be fairly simple. We'll deal with it later. There's got to be a better way to get a rotation from an angle axis. Angle axis. And we're going to rotate this many degrees around the vector 3 dot back. No, from 2. From 2 rotation. From the direction. I knew there's got to be a better way to do it. That's got to be it. From the direction we're facing to vector theta, right? Other way around. Is this going to be around the right axis? Might be casting it. Rotations. Okay, well, let's fix some of the other bugs. Transform, and we'll make a transform for bullet spawn location. And we'll call this one bullet spawn location dot position. So we'll spawn it here. What does here mean? Let's make an empty game object and call it our bullet spawn location. Simple enough. And then we'll add that to our thing here. And then we're going to move it. We're just going to offset it to be at the tip of the gun. But now as I rotate, if I select bullet spawn, you can see that I'm pointing on my screen. This game object is being correctly offset, so it's not spawning at our center. Because our square doesn't have any collisions, we don't have that little lerpiness. We should fix that anyway because we're still going to hit our own bullets. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's what we want. But it isn't. So let's fix that. And we'll fix it with some layers. We'll add a new layer for player bullets. And we'll add a new layer for player, and then of course we'll have enemy bullets that we'll deal with later. So the player will put on the player layer. And sometimes you make that like an agents or entities layer. And then the bullet, oops, I'm getting ahead of myself. And then the bullet we'll put on the player bullet layer. Because player bullets and enemy bullets are going to collide with different objects. So in our physics settings, we can find our wonderful collision matrix. Our collision matrix, it allows us to say that certain layers just won't collide with each other. So player bullets and player should not collide. So now player bullet collisions just won't happen. That's what we want. We won't get events. We won't, it'll be slightly more performant, I think. It would be nice if I actually saved that. That's on player. I changed the children so the actual collider object is on player. Why did I collide? Did I change the child of the bullet, where the actual child collision is? This collider is on player bullets. It is. Player collides with player bullets. I'm on physics settings. I want to be on physics 2D settings because I am using physics 2D. Of course. Yeah, perfect. So let's add one more property to the bullet handler, which is going to be a sort of fire or maximum fire speed. Private float max fire frequency. And then a private float for fire timer. And we'll set fire timer greater than 0 equal to 0. What am I saying? What am I doing? If fire timer is greater than max fire frequency, then we will fire a bullet. And in update, we will take the fire timer, set it equal to the fire timer plus time dot delta time. How much time has passed since the previous update? And then in start, we'll just set that to 0. I mean, it's kind of 0 by default, but we'll say at the beginning of the game. Actually, we'll set it to max fire frequency. That way, +1. That way you can fire a bullet on the very first frame of the game. You don't have to wait like a reload speed once the game begins. If it was 0, we'd have to wait that one reload speed. So if I go to the player and I set that fire frequency to something like a full second, way too long, I can only, no matter how much I click, I can only fire once per second. So let's change that to something more reasonable. And now it's very easy to add the player input. We can change this from get mouse button down to get mouse button. And we'll make that even faster, just a little slower. So now it's going to try, if we hold the button down, it's going to try firing every single frame. But that timer is going to keep that from happening. But I can just press the button and it's going to fire. We can make the fire happen every single frame. Very fast. Or we can make it much slower. And so on. Let's use our Let's set a minimum property of 0 for that. Here we go. I like to keep my serialized fields private. Header, weapon configuration. Header layer config. Yeah, that's good. Player config, set the spawn location, set the web config. And we're going to discover that these are these properties between what prefab we're using, the speed of that particular object, and its fire frequency. These are the data that we're going to want to move into some kind of data structure, maybe using a struct or even a scriptable object that allows us to switch between them without having to we can make changes and we don't lose our one object. We can have different types of data, different presets of the data. We can switch weapons at runtime just by passing in different variables, blah, 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 blah. Data structure is very important in Unity, but we're not there yet. We just have a basic firing script. Nice, let's turn gravity off for our rigid body, and then we will be done. And maybe change collision to continuous for bullets if they move fast. I'm on a pretty powerful computer. I'm not going to see that performance hit. Okay, great. That's that.